Loving thy neighbour is easier said than done.
If he was a slug, I would put salt round him so he explodes.
They nearly got me arrested. That's the type of noise we have to put up with.
When the garden fence marks enemy lines.
Have you got your recorder on?
It's all right. Really?
Your home life can turn into a living hell.
Give me my dog!
What have you? What the hell's the matter with you?
Coming up, a family dog is killed by next door.
Watch out, my heart's just been pulled away.
A fight over land gets nasty.
We were bullied into protecting what was ours.
I am not moving, this is my land, this is my property.
And an entire block is terrorised by one woman.
She'd had like a 20-year history of terrorising the building.
Whitehaven, a remote town on the coast of Cumbria, would appear to be the perfect place to settle and live a quiet and peaceful life. But things don't always turn out as planned.
The whole situation, total nightmare.
Past 5 years, it's been hell. I've sat and I've cried and I've cried.
Carol and Trevor Gilmore bought a rundown barn in the area. That was to be their little slice of heaven.
Trevor actually fell in love with it right away. He didn't even have to go into the property itself.
You could tell the potential of the building and the panoramics. That's what really sold me on it.
But the beautiful views weren't the only thing that came with the barn. Lynn Brophy had lived next door for 18 years, and the previous owners had had long-running disputes with her in the past.
We were told not to get into any confrontation with her from the estate agents from the word go, and we didn't.
In 2009, Trevor and Carol got the keys to the barn, and as a building tradesman, Trevor wanted to be hands-on in the renovation.
Plan was to do the property up over the next couple of years as and when we could afford it, and then when it got to near completion, sell our own property and spend the equity out of that for the internal finishes.
With a mammoth task on their hands, the Gilmores started work immediately.
This building here, it was unsafe and it was derelict, so we got security fencing which ran right along to the fence.
It was up for sale, it had been ransacked, so we thought, because it was a bit semi-rural and we weren't on site all the time, we had to put CCTV up to protect the place.
The cameras covered their garden and outbuildings 24/7. But what they caught on camera were their neighbours.
Mrs. Brophy and her family dismantled part of the Harris fencing, went into the area with a strimmer and a lawnmower, and this little bit of grass here, the seamless concrete, they used to strim it. We didn't have a clue why they were engaging in such bizarre behaviour.
We laughed at first and thought she's doing a job for us.
Yeah,
she's keeping the weeds down.
But Trevor and Carol would soon find out that providing a free gardening service was the last thing on her mind.
We were working here. Mrs. Brophy came from her house, said, "Can I have a word?" So we stopped work and started talking to her.
I did, you didn't.
Well, Trevor started talking to her, I just observed.
Trevor Gilmore was fine, he introduced himself as Trevor and he was quite nice. But Carol, she stayed standoffish, she didn't speak, she didn't say hello, she didn't say anything, and I thought, uh-oh, alarm bells started ringing, to be honest.
And it was at that point that Trevor asked her to remove her belongings from a building that was on our land.
She said no, the garage was actually owned by her. Well, according to our deeds, it was in my land.
And her answer was, Well, it's in my deeds as well.
Land agency drew the deeds up wrong.
I says, I believe they're mine. I was told that they were mine. I says, and that's it at the end of the day.
And I thought, we'll see, I'll sort you out.
No, you didn't.
So on a Saturday morning, 8:30, I came up with 2 colleagues who works for us, my wife and my stepson, and we cleared the garage out.
I couldn't believe what I was seeing, to be honest. I couldn't. Shouted through the window, leave that stuff alone, it's mine, that building does not belong to you, get off it. They just laughed. That's all they did, was just stood there laughing.
Trevor's deeds showed that Mrs. Brophy owned less than a metre of the garage.
Then I got my still saw out, split it on the boundary, and then knocked it down with a sledgehammer. We left her with a bush shelter.
How could I stop them? How? I'd like to know how. I couldn't go up and wrestle them to the ground or anything like that.
But a few months later, Lynn Brophy dealt them another blow.
We got a letter in the post, and she was claiming part of the land.
And that was the start of our nightmare.
Lynn was putting in a claim through the courts for possession of the Gilmore's entire front garden, on the grounds that she had tended to it for the last 18 years.
Started tending that land when I moved there in 1997, in summer, and I've got photographic evidence to prove that as well.
We laughed at first because we couldn't believe it, and then when we realised how serious it was, we just couldn't believe that somebody could do that. We were
bullied into protecting what was ours.
The gauntlet had been thrown, and the Gilmores had no choice but to engage a solicitor and build their case for court.
It was just paperwork, research. It was a full-time job for me. I didn't sleep. I could go for days without sleeping. It took over our lives. It took over everything. It was a 24/7
nightmare.
Coming up, a dog-loving family's worst nightmares come true.
They've both been shot.
If a dog was going to kill 120 birds, there's going to be some sort of blood round the front.
And a woman terrorises a whole block of flats.
A lot of her sort of staring into our windows.
Stupid car.
Neighbourly disputes can be a nightmare, and for some people, police intervention is the only option for peace of mind.
She would watch from her windows. She will bang on their doors at 2 in the morning, and she will get closer and closer and menace them.
Go on, you're alright. What are you going to do, eh?
3 years ago, Julie Reid moved into a property in a small block of 10 flats in Chesham.
My boyfriend already lived there for 6 months when I moved in. I was living at Ireland at the time. It was just to stop the long distance. It wasn't really working for us. I was aware that one of the neighbours was a little bit eccentric, as the landlord put it.
The block of flats where they were renting had a communal car park, and it was here that Julie first met her new neighbour, Judith Robinson, just 1 week after moving in.
I was going to my car, and as I was about to get in, Judith came from round behind me. It was the first time I'd officially met her.
She was very rude. She didn't introduce herself. She proceeded to tell me that I wasn't allowed to park where I was because I didn't live there. I tried to explain to her that I'd just moved in.
Julie decided it was best to avoid her neighbour, but that wouldn't be easy.
We were in bed, it was about 1 a.m, and we were woken up by the sound of the doorbell ringing, and then someone holding their finger down on the doorbell, so it was sort of continuous. We were a bit worried as to why someone thought maybe it was some sort of emergency. So I think Paul was a bit surprised when he got to the door and it was just Judith standing there.
Our neighbour Judith had a high-powered torch which she shone in his face and babbled incoherently about our kitchen worktop. My boyfriend followed her round the building because he didn't understand what she was saying, and it seems that while we'd been out, a kitchen worktop had been delivered and left face down in my car parking space, and because there weren't any lights, I hadn't seen it and I parked on it without noticing. She was insisting that I should get out of my bed and move the car because I was damaging her kitchen worktop.
Julie was starting to get the idea that her neighbour was a little more than just eccentric, and used her mobile phone to start documenting some of Judith's behaviour.
If you went to the bathroom in the middle of the night and Judith was in the garden, it could be as late as sort of 2 or 3 in the morning. She would sort of make howling noises. Sometimes the howling would be like screeching or saying words.
You stupid car.
Or other times it could be like wolf howling or owl noises. One time I was in the bathroom, probably about 2 or 3 a.m. She started yelling, "Kill it." I'm assuming to her cat, but it was really creepy.
But it wasn't just strange noises that Julie found disturbing when her neighbour Judith was in the garden.
There was a lot of her sort of staring into our windows. She gave us the finger quite a lot if we were in the kitchen. She'd get her torch out late at night, sort of 10, 11, and start shining it in our windows.
Julie and Paul just wanted a quiet life and tried to avoid running into their neighbour. But the car park was on shared ground.
I came down to my car one morning and found that my wiper blade had been rotated down, so it was pointing in the wrong direction.
And that wasn't all.
Happening quite regularly that when I came down to my car, the wing mirrors would have been moved, pointing completely the wrong direction that you wouldn't be able to drive with. I mean, I had pretty strong suspicions that it was more than likely Judith, because she'd been out in the garden making a lot of noise the night before.
We'd been in the flat about a year, and Judith's behaviour got to the sort of annoyed us enough that we decided to phone the police. And there's a dedicated police officer at Cheshire Police that deals with her, which should have told us something. It was kind of a bit of an eye-opener because we just thought that she was a bit of a sad old lady at that point, and actually it turned out she'd had like a 20-year history of terrorising the building.
In the last 12 years, the amount of harassment cases reported to the police has more than doubled, and PC Phil Thompson had been aware of the problems with Judith since joining the branch 3 years previously. But the one thing he was lacking was hard evidence.
Every previous victim that was being harassed by Judith had dropped out. The first time I met Julie, I had to lay it out to them. Are you going to give statements? Are you going to record what you're being exposed to? Are you willing to have CCTV? Because it's quite an involved process to be able to prove what they were telling me was going on.
Desperate to end their broken nights and get some peace, Julie and Paul agreed to do what was needed to catch Judith in the act.
We'd hoped that the CCTV camera would be a deterrent, but actually she just sort of escalated.
In Cumbria, Trevor and Carol Gilmore had bought land and a tumble-down barn with the hope of building their dream home. But it had become a bitter fight when Lynn Brophy, their only neighbour for miles, claimed she actually owned most of their property.
The only reason that we can think of to explain Mrs. Brophy's behaviour is that she's bitter that we bought the property when her family were trying to buy it.
My son and daughter-in-law had made offers on the property, and they were declined, and then they made another offer and they were declined, and they ended up making an offer of $81,000, and it was knocked back for Mr. and Mrs. Gilmore's £60,000 offer.
The previous owners had chosen not to sell to Lynn Brophy, selling instead to the Gilmores. But Lynn still wanted it, and now claimed the Gilmores' entire front garden was in fact hers. The Gilmores were now being forced to prove they owned the land, despite their deeds being clear.
The legal bills kept going up and up and up.
And Trevor's day job was suffering.
I was letting people down that I'd worked for years, and At one stage they said take time out to get yourself sorted and then come back to us.
And they were still trying to continue work on the barn whenever they had a free moment.
Mr Gilmore knows they're not supposed to work at weekends. They can work on a Saturday till 1 o'clock and not Sundays. They worked with a digger, and I thought, I don't believe this, it's just like a builder's yard. And your house vibrates, you can feel the digger breaking the concrete.
Come on, girls!
For Lynn, living next door to the Gilmores' new home was becoming hard to bear.
I even had to have noise monitors in my house because Mrs Gilmore had a cockerel on the front.
We had about 120 visits in a 12-month period. As I say, numerous visits off the council. Nothing was ever proved.
It got to the stage where we wanted to do something, we had to have a right good look at it and think, I wonder what problems this is going to arise. She done everything in her power to hold us up from actually renovating our property.
The court date arrived, and during the case, the previous owners of the barn rubbished Lynn's claims that she had tended the land.
The judge ruled everything in our favour. There was no land to be split, and in the verdict he said quite how Mrs Brophy thought she would be able successfully to deceive the respondents and the adjudicator and her own lawyers, no doubt, with this crude piece of manipulation, I have no idea. Which, when we read it, made us feel so much better, because we realised that other people could see through our lies as well.
When I lost the case, I was depressed. It wasn't nice being made a liar. I can tell you now it wasn't.
Lynn was also ordered to pay the Gilmores an interim payment for their costs during the case, a total of £10,000.
Our dream was back on track. I think we went out for a meal that night and enjoyed ourselves. Didn't last long at all.
The Gilmores had beaten Lynn Brophy in court, but the relief of their success was short-lived.
Mrs Brophy sent us a cheque.
£1.
For £1.
The countryside can seem like the perfect place for the quiet life many of us dream of. But even heaven has rules, and when you break them, all hell can break loose. In 2005, Lisa Tuttle and her family moved from a busy town to the remote village of Geldeston.
We moved here because we were in a 3-bedroom house that was pretty overcrowded because we have 5 children. This place with a massive back garden, big house, lots of room for the kids to run about in, lots of open fields, lots of walkways.
Surrounded by arable land, they could not have asked for a more idyllic surrounding to start a new life.
Couldn't have asked for a nicer place to live.
But for the kids, it took a while to feel at home.
At first you had to find friends. There weren't many friends around here, but then as the years went by, more people moved in here.
To help them settle in, Lisa bought them a dog. Ruby the Labrador was the perfect addition to a country home. Or so they thought.
Well, Ruby, she was a really gentle dog. I loved her, but she kept escaping.
But with nothing but fields surrounding them, the family thought, what harm could Ruby's roaming do? A visit from the farmer next door soon provided the answer.
He just came and knocked on the door, and he came and said, you know, your dog's getting out, she's being a problem, she's going after my pheasants. I didn't really like him. I thought he was a bit rude.
Lisa's husband James, who was asked not to be shown, was also in the house at the time.
He come to the door, I think, because the dog's got out on his land, and he said, "Is that your dog?" I said, "Yeah." Basically, he was sort of a bit angry because the dog's on his land.
I was a bit upset because I didn't want to be causing trouble with the neighbours. Went out and we done our best to try and make sure that didn't happen again. You know, I just thought that would be the end of it and we wouldn't see him again.
The family patched up their fence, but not well enough, and soon Ruby was running wild through the village again.
A few days later, the farmer came to the door again. He was really quite angry this time.
He came round, had a go at me, saying she'd been on the land, apparently killed 120 birds. And then he said, well, I see her on there again, I'll shoot her.
Their neighbour John Cook ran a beef and arable farm, which was home to thousands of partridges and pheasants. And the law allows farmers like him to shoot an animal if it's threatening or worrying their livestock. But Lisa and James refused to believe that Ruby could be doing any harm.
She came back and there weren't a trace on her, because she was near enough white and there was no blood or anything. But clearly if a dog was going to kill 120 birds, there's going to be some sort of blood round the front.
She was gentle. I just found it so hard to believe what he was saying was true.
Farmer John Cook demanded the family pay for the birds he said Ruby had killed. According to him, each was worth £30, which would have meant a loss of over £3,500.
But I said I wanted proof of these dead pheasants before I gave him any money, and we never heard anything from him again.
Lisa refused to pay, but knew something had to change.
I took his threat very seriously. Ruby's safety had to come first, so I had to give Ruby away. That tore me apart for about 3 or 4 months.
Kind of devastated, really. Like, really heartbroken. So I've had her for quite a long time.
Ruby had just given birth to a litter of puppies. To fill the void she left, the family decided to keep one.
I come back from school one day, and there she was just a puppy, and I said I want that dog, and we kept her. I named her Marley. She was a lovely dog.
But little Marley soon took after her mum, with devastating results.
A chunk of me was gone.
Coming up, in Chesham, true colours are caught on camera.
It was fairly obvious at that point that she'd definitely keyed my car.
You must have caught the culprit by now.
And it's Paradise Lost in Cumbria.
When we bought the property, we didn't think for 1 minute we'd be living as we are now.
In Chesham, Julie Reid had moved in with her boyfriend and almost immediately began having problems with their neighbour, Judith Robinson, who'd owned a flat there for nearly 30 years.
There we go, that's Judith, leaning out of her window, oh, she's gone.
It always felt like she just really wanted you to know that she didn't want you there and that you weren't welcome, and it was very intimidating. My friends didn't like staying because they didn't like the howling in the garden and things either. It's not normal.
After a year of strange goings-on, Julie and Paul had contacted the police, only to find that their neighbour was already well known to them.
This had been going on for 20 years. It became very clear to me from the volume of different people complaining that something had to be done about it.
Judith and Paul had put up CCTV in an attempt to get enough evidence to have Judith prosecuted.
I was out in the garden putting up my washing, and Judith came out and confronted me about the camera. She was really aggressive about it, trying to say that the camera was looking into her flat, that we were spying on her. I tried to explain to her that basically we got the camera because on a few occasions my wipers and my mirrors had been tampered with. She told me this was ridiculous, no one was touching my car. As I was trying to leave the garden, she sort of got into my space, she wouldn't let me pass. And then as I was walking around the building, she came like a few steps behind me, shouting at me that I was harassing her. What was I getting out of this? Why would I want to spy on an old woman?
We have asked Judith for her version of events. She told us that she felt she was being harassed by Julie and Paul, and that the problems only started when they put up their CCTV cameras. Julie, however, was feeling more and more singled out.
No, it kind of became apparent that she really tended to focus on me more than my boyfriend. Quite often, if I was getting out the car, she'd come round out of her flat as if she was going to speak to me, and then she'd see him and she'd about turn and go back in.
According to Phil, this was typical of the woman he had been tracking for 3 years.
My experience of dealing with Judith is that she will select the most vulnerable, typically a female that lives at this location, to target. And Julie was that person, and she got the worst from Judith.
Scared when home alone, Julie tried to get on with her life.
So I came down one morning and noticed that there was a long scratch sort of on this side of my passenger panel and along here somewhere as well, that hadn't been there the night before. So I went back upstairs and checked the CCTV, and it appeared to show Judith walking past my car, holding something shiny and sort of brushing up against it in both those places. And then a couple of nights later, she was having a rant in the garden, and she came running up to the CCTV camera, shaking her house keys and yelling that we hadn't caught the culprit yet.
You must have caught the culprit by now. So what good is this? What good is this? Huh?
For PC Phil, this was the sort of evidence he'd been waiting for.
You could see her on camera go over and inspect her handiwork from where the vehicle had been damaged. To me, she was taunting them and trying to seek out confrontation.
Julie and Paul's CCTV was going 24/7, but the constant taunts were also being recorded on Julie's phone.
Go on, go on, go on. Here I am. What are you going to do, eh? What are you going to do, eh?
There were occasions where she'd just shout, wipers, mirrors, and sort of a really shrill, it's a really freaky voice that she used.
Wipers! Wipers! Mirrors!
Wipers, mirrors, and...
Mirrors! Wipers!
I think she just wanted to upset me more than anything else.
For me to prove what was going on, that was key.
PC Thompson was looking forward to making an arrest, but would he have enough evidence to convict Judith of harassment? In Norfolk, the Tuttle family rehomed their troublesome dog Ruby when their neighbour John Cook threatened to shoot her for allegedly killing 120 of his birds. To make up for her loss, the family kept one of her puppies, which they called Marley.
I used to let Marley hit off her lead, so she used to go in the river. She used to slide down this slope here and jump in and have a little swim about. She used to love it. She would just come near you and then shake all the water off near you. You're like, Marley, no. Marley was mainly my dog. Fed her, paid for her food sometimes. Yeah.
But as Marley grew up, it became clear she'd inherited her mother Ruby's adventurous spirit.
Her only flaw was escaping. She just liked to get out and run about outside.
Despite Marley regularly running wild in the surrounding fields, in 2013, James and Lisa saw no harm in getting 2 more dogs, Lily and Bella.
Me and Dad done this because they kept digging under the hedge and getting out. This originally wasn't here. This bit worked, but not that bit. There's a big hole there where they can get out, but in the hedge.
Despite the patchwork of wood, metal and wire, the dogs repeatedly escaped onto their neighbour's land.
Sometimes I spot them and they're all together, and Marley sprints off, and then Bella goes second and Lily's last, so they all used to follow each other.
But Lisa and James say they received no complaints from any of their neighbours during this period. And in August 2014, the Tuttle family left on a long-awaited holiday.
We'd saved quite hard for this and we were all looking forward to it. We didn't take the dogs because the car's just big enough to fit the kids in.
Lisa left her mom and sister to watch over the animals. But 3 days into their trip away, she got a phone call.
I answered it. It was my mum. She said that the farmer had put a complaint in about Lily and Marley because they'd been on his land. Well, that was a shock because I hadn't had any run-ins with this farmer since what had happened with Ruby, so I did initially start to panic.
The police wanted to speak to Lisa when she returned about ways of keeping the dogs from escaping. Lisa thought everything was under control, but the next day,
Mum got a phone call and she went outside. I kind of got the feeling that Marley was like suffering about the dogs.
It was Lisa's sister. The dogs had escaped again, and this time the workers on the farm had seen them.
She said that they'd both been shot. They're dead. It was like a dream.
A chunk of me was gone. Well, a chunk of my heart's just been pulled away.
Gutted. Totally gutted. Just totally devastated.
According to the farmer, the dogs had smashed their way into a pen full of his birds and slaughtered them, giving his gamekeeper more than enough grounds to destroy them under UK law. Bella, the only surviving dog, returned home with a dead bird in her mouth, which Lisa has since kept in the freezer.
As you can see, it hasn't got a tooth mark in it and it's fairly whole. Even got the feathers all still there. I don't think she had any intentions of ripping it up or trying to eat it.
John Cook insists the shooting of the two dogs was lawful, and so far no charges have been brought against his gamekeeper or the Tuttles. But the family's simple life in the country has now changed forever.
I'm on antidepressants now. I don't even want to live round here anymore. Everywhere we go round here, there's reminders of what he's done and what he's taken away from us.
Trevor and Carol Gilmore had fought and won a battle over ownership of their entire front garden with next-door neighbour Lynn Brophy.
Everything's ruled in our favour. Everything. There isn't nothing that is ruled in our favour.
But she doesn't give up.
No, she never gives up.
Lynn Brophy had been ordered to pay the Gilmores £10,000, but she was still convinced she had a case.
I can prove that from when I moved there, I saw to them buildings and cut the grass. Well, not me personally, but my family. We've always used them, and that plus that they belong to me.
Lynn appealed to the High Court, but this time she was on her own.
My solicitor wasn't prepared to support me because I had outstanding fees with him.
With the battle still ongoing, and with no payment from Lynn, the Gilmores were now at financial breaking point.
We couldn't keep absorbing all the legal fees that we were faced with.
There was no money left at all to do anything, which was just... the dream had gone.
And after over 2 years of litigation, they were faced with a harsh reality.
The drastic action we had to take was to sell my property that we owned in Whitehaven.
And what we were left with was the shell of a building, living in a caravan. One big problem I have is...
where to put stuff.
Shut up talking! Everything's just squashed everywhere.
Compact and bijou, it's just...
But finally, the end looked in sight when Lynn's appeal went to court.
Went in front of the judge, and even though he says you have to point errors of law out, well, I only had errors of fact, and I lost it on those grounds.
Lynn had nowhere else to take her appeal. She still owed the Gilmores £10,000, and 10 months later, they got a cheque through the post.
£1.
For £1. Via recorded delivery, which cost more than what the cheque was made out for.
I did send them a cheque for £1, but it was a nominal payment, so they couldn't say that I hadn't paid anything.
That started another court procedure to get the money back.
The Gilmores eventually won a court order for Lynn to pay them £100 a month until the debt is paid.
Well, £100's a lot of money at the end of the day. It is a lot of money. I do struggle to pay £100 a month. But rather than give them the benefit of the doubt and making me bankrupt, no, I'll pay it.
But just days after the order, trouble erupted yet again. When the Gilmores employed workmen to mark out a new boundary fence along the back of their property, Mrs. Brophy and her family came out in force, and Carol got it all on camera.
They knocked the string line down, come onto our land, the other side.
Miss Gilmore ripped my hedging out. That was on my land. I thought, I'm not having this, no, not on my land.
And then while Trevor was working, Mrs. Brophy actually got in the hole that the post was going to go in to stop him working.
And I phoned the police to say that they were trespassing on my land and that I was not going to move out this hole. I said, no matter how cold it is, how late it is, whether it rains, I am not moving. This is my land, this is my property, and that's it.
The police asked Trevor and Carol to stop work on the fence until the matter could be resolved.
I was so disgusted, I just went back into the caravan and I stayed in there because I'd just had enough.
But Trevor wasn't going down without a fight.
He said, I could play this game all day.
Coming up, the war over land continues in Cumbria.
No one will beat me.
And things reach boiling point in Chesham.
You could see it on her face that this time she was in trouble.
Cold, damp.
In rural Cumbria, Trevor and Carol Gilmore had been battling over land with their neighbour Lynn Brophy for 5 years.
For somebody to be so nasty to other people is a sad way to live your life.
Lynn was staging a protest against the Gilmores, putting a fence up on their boundary.
I ushered the police and them off my land and said, this is my land and it's not Mrs. Brophy's, so I'm sorry, you'll have to leave.
After a full review, police told Lynn that the Gilmores were within their rights to build the fence, and if she interfered with it again, she'd be breaking the law.
I don't like the woman. I would never like to meet the woman ever again in my life, and I wish she would just sell up, move on, and get out of my life.
I have sat there and felt like just packing my bags and going. Sometimes I hate going back there because I know they're there. And I've cried and I've cried and I've cried, and there's probably still more tears. I actually thought, how much more can I take?
Following the multiple court hearings, the Gilmores' legal costs have increased to £25,000. Now with interest, Lynn owes them nearer £30,000.
We don't bank on Mrs. Brophy ever paying the debt off unless she comes to sell a house. And in all honesty, that is the bitterest pill for us to swallow.
But despite it all, the Gilmores still have their dreams.
This room is going to be what is eventually, hopefully, going to be our bedroom. But hopefully,
This year, 2015, we shall be living in it.
this room will be the main bathroom. Yeah, with a bit of luck. Fingers crossed.
Come on, let's go.
But Lynn is still adamant.
I intend to fight tooth and nail. The boundary line was drawn wrong, incorrectly, and I will try and get a rectification of the deeds, either that or the decision overturned. And I will win that, I know I will. I've had cancer, I've beat cancer, and no one will beat me. Nobody. Cancer can't beat me, nobody will.
In Chesham, Julie Reid and her partner Paul were feeling harassed by their neighbour Judith Robinson. With the help of the police, they were trying to obtain enough evidence to get her prosecuted.
At that time, we were kind of having to phone the police emergency line sort of every other day, sometimes twice a day. There was pretty much every day there was something.
But things were about to reach boiling point.
One evening when Judith was outside in the garden, and I went to go to the bathroom, but when I turned my bathroom light on, she sort of came over to underneath the window and started shouting abuse at one point. She threatened that her lodger was going to be there the next day, and when he found out about this, that I'd be sorry. So it just really didn't make me feel very safe in the property anymore.
This threat was enough for the police to finally make a move.
There was about 8 or 9 police officers, I think, in 4 vans. Comforting to know that they did take it as seriously, because it's not a major crime at the end of the day, but it is something that had quite a severe effect on not just our lives, but like all of the residents.
For PC Thompson, the arrest was the culmination of years of hard work.
We had a lot of conversations over the years. I'd laid out the law to her quite firmly that this had to stop. It was going to end this way eventually. And she was very arrogant, very cocky. She'd make spurious complaints and carry on offending. And the day that I walked into her house to finally arrest her, you could see it on her face that this time she was in trouble. So on the day of the arrest, when I was the last person to leave, and as I left, all the other residents from the block at that time congregated on this corner and gave me a standing ovation for taking her away.
Judith pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of harassment and 1 of criminal damage for scratching Julie's car. The CCTV footage and audio clips Paul and Julie had recorded were used as evidence.
The footage shown in court speaks for itself. There is virtually nothing Judith could have said to get out of what she'd done.
Judith was found guilty of all charges and she was fined £500, given a 9-week suspended sentence, and Julie won a restraining order preventing Judith from contacting or harassing her. Judith declined to take part in this film, but she insists that she is innocent of all charges. Paul and Julie have now moved away from the area.
It's really nice just not being able to go outside and not have to worry about who's watching you or about getting abuse shouted at you. It's good.
She is a very, very nasty, horrible person, and that comes across quite clearly. If you had to live beside that, you would not last. You would be moving as soon as possible.
Have you got a nightmare neighbour story? Get in touch at channel5.com/nightmare neighbour. Next time, a pensioner gets violent.
If he was a slug, I would put salt round him so he explodes.
A veteran tackles the police next door.
I picked up this and swung it.
And the nightmare building extension.
The gap between our property and his is like inches.
Over on 5 USA next, justice is served in the Windy City in the Season 2 premiere of Chicago PD. Here on Channel 5, Brazen Britain season continues with outrageous oldies blowing the lot and behaving badly in new 24-hour party pensioners.
In the UK, our neighbours often live too close to home.
Come and speak to me.
So it's no surprise 1 in 5 of us have been in an argument with next door. Coming up, a nightmare building project next door.
The workmanship is absolutely horrendous.
He's threatened to blow our house up.
A fight over land.
I told them both to get off my property and stay off my property.
And a community under siege.
She's brought all this on this village. End of.
And I've always said that I would spend time in prison.
A quiet suburban street in northeast London has been home to Tony and Veronica Martin for the past 23 years.
I was actually born in Woodford, so I've lived in Woodford all my life.
This particular area's got a village atmosphere. Everyone seems to know each other. Very friendly. You can step out the front door. There's always someone to say hello to. people get on with each other.
Next door to them is Tariq Ahmed. On the other side of Mr. Ahmed, in her detached home, is Helen Corlin.
It is the only house like it in this road. It was a one-off, because this house was built on what should have been a road.
For 4 blissful years, the Martins, the Ahmeds and the Corlins all got along well.
When the Ahmeds first moved in, we were very friendly with them. We even helped them to cut back some of the bushes in the garden.
We would have, if they was having a barbecue, more often than not we would get barbecue food passed across the fence, which was very, very nice.
So it was just everyday, day-to-day conversation.
But neighbourly love between Mr. Ahmed and his neighbours was about to go out the window.
I got an email saying that he wanted to dig within 3 metres of our property and said that the builder would be sending me some plans.
The first thing Helen knew about Mr. Ahmed's plans was when he came banging at her front door holding a magazine.
On the front of the magazine was a white double-fronted house, which he then told me he was going to proceed to make next door into.
It was clear from the picture Mr. Ahmed's plans involved greatly increasing the size of his 3-bedroom end terrace.
In his own mind, he was going to make this into an enormous palace that should have been sitting in an acre of land.
Much to Helen's alarm, Mr. Ahmed's grand design meant his extension would go right up to her boundary wall.
And when the plans came through, I was told that this would be a 2-storey extension here, and I was asking how I was meant to get in and out of my front door and my back door without any danger.
Concerned by his ambitious plans, Helen went to talk to her neighbour, Mr. Ahmed.
I tried to explain to him that we had a right to lights, and that the fact is that he would be blocking all our light out, and so he had would not be able to do it.
Mr. Ahmed declined to tell his side of the story, but according to Helen, his response was far from neighbourly.
Mr. Ahmed's reply is to start swearing and cursing and threatening, and that's when I said to him, do ourselves all a favour, we will do this the legal way, and then we won't have to talk to each other.
Helen got in touch with the council.
I explained that he would be taking my right of light.
The council's response, though, was that in this case, right to light was a private matter.
I realised that they were going to pass these plans, and it was a nightmare beginning to brew up inside of me. And from then on, Mr. Ahmed just literally pushed through everything.
Within days, the building work had started. And it wasn't long before alarm bells were ringing for both of Mr. Ahmed's neighbours.
When the building work started, it was shambolic. They weren't what I would class as builders. There was no health and safety, there's no high-vis jackets, no hard hats, chaotic.
And at the centre of it all, directing the work, was Mr. Ahmed himself.
He would strut around like a peacock. He's got the voice, and he'd make sure that everybody heard it.
He just walks around so much like a cross between Del Boy and Ali G.
The building works were becoming a serious problem.
The noise the whole time during the build was absolutely horrendous. No matter what, he was determined to work 12, 14 hours a day on this site. There was no cut-off for us. We felt like we were living on the building site constantly.
As Mr. Ahmed's extension progressed, it began to cast a shadow over Helen's home life.
You never seem to get the sunshine or the warmth into the house anymore on a nice day. You sort of like always feel like it's winter.
Her once light and airy house was now shrouded in darkness.
Every day now I can't even come into this room without having to put lights on.
And the distance separating the two houses is just a few feet, or the length of Helen's mum's walking stick. The house still hasn't been signed off by building regulations, and in Helen's opinion, it's unsafe.
The war's so dangerous, and we're just left living this nightmare, aren't we, Mum? Yes, definitely.
Helen's once happy home was fast becoming her idea of hell.
It has not been finished at all. The workmanship is absolutely horrendous. It's even bowing at the top. It makes me feel totally claustrophobic, and I literally feel like the walls are coming in on me.
Little did she know, but the nightmare was far from over. Coming up, in Somerset, one woman manages to alienate a whole village.
People would drive along here, mouthing evil bitch.
And neighbours go to war over an unowned strip of land.
And my gates were delivered back to me inside my garden.
Bournemouth is a great tourist hotspot right next to the sea. But the fight for parking spaces isn't confined to the seafront.
Without the off-road parking, you'd be lucky to park within a mile of your house.
In the town's quiet suburbs, it's first come, first served.
My sister visits me on a regular basis. She has to park in the next road or in the little town, and then she has to walk back.
Luckily for single mom Deborah Freestone, parking her car wasn't an issue. She used the end of her garden, which she got to via a strip of unregistered land.
This is the back of my house, semi-detached, and there's a side alley there. Leads out to a 60-foot length garden. This is the drive here. This is my boundary here, along here. Always parked on here since 1986. And there's a car actually parked where my KA is now. Well, it's part of my life, really.
In 2011, Deborah made a decision that would have dire consequences for neighbourly relations.
Unfortunately, my mum died, and I inherited a large sum of money. I decided to pay off the mortgage of the house, and I thought I wanted to tidy up the end of the garden.
Having used the unregistered land with no issues for 28 years, she decided to try and claim it and have a driveway laid.
There was never any objections throughout the 20-odd years I've lived here. It's a strip of land that goes nowhere, only into my garden, and no use to anyone at all.
So she sent an application to the land registry.
We thought we'd been looking after it, so we thought, yeah, it's obviously going to be us.
While she waited to get confirmation about the patch of land, a new family moved into the neighbourhood.
When I heard of new neighbours moving in, I was delighted, and I thought I'd go and say hello and introduce myself.
The new owner of the house next to the land was Mr. Charles Garrignani.
The family who moved in seemed very nice.
3 months after the arrival of her new neighbours, Deborah wanted to get started on her new driveway. But she received some unexpected news.
And then I received a letter from the land registry. They refused my application. They said that through lack of evidence, I couldn't claim it. I was absolutely, devastated.
A main reason for the rejection was because the land wasn't enclosed on Deborah's property. So she was advised to go ahead with the build in order to officially claim it as hers.
The solicitors reassured me that it was just a legality to be able to obtain the land.
Sure she was taking the right path, Deborah set her builders to work.
So we thought if we cover it up, it'll be a lot nicer and a lot more neater.
I really like these gates for the security of my home. They cost me £500 and I got a special sign to say that the drive was in constant use. All in all, it cost me about £4,000.
Everything went well, and soon Deborah was enjoying her newly paved, gated driveway. But then, 3 months later, there was a knock at the door. It was Mr. Garignani, along with one of Deborah's other neighbours.
They were stood there and said, "We have a letter for you. We suggest you read it." The content of the letter was basically saying that I erected these gates deliberately trying to impede their access to the land. It was demanding me to revert the drive back to its normal state of grass. And I thought, how ridiculous.
Deborah made it clear to her neighbours what she thought of their demands.
I put the letter back into the envelope and I threw it at Mr. Garignani and told them both to get off my property and stay off my property.
She was just trying to stand her ground and stop them bullying her in a sense.
Deborah was suddenly faced with the dilemma: remove the £4,000 driveway that was next to Mr. Garignani's house, or risk the wrath of her neighbours.
I wasn't going to tear up my lovely driveway. I had very good advice from my solicitors and they reassured me that I was doing everything above board, and I didn't care whether the two neighbours had an issue.
What Deborah didn't realise was that the turf war was just beginning. Withycombe in Somerset, like most rural villages, is a place where everybody knows each other's business. Bill Galloway's family has lived here for generations.
It was a very busy village with people coming in from house to house. People were so closer together because it was nearly all family and friends.
But over the years, the local population has dwindled.
Nothing happens. You know, this is a busy day. We've seen a car. People generally quiet, keep themselves to themselves.
Now eager newcomers are moving in from the town for a taste of the country life. Like Meg Sunningdale, who moved here 8 years ago with her husband after falling in love with the area.
When we moved in here, we were really excited. We're in this lovely valley here, as you can see. Trees, woodland, this wonderful stream. It's just the perfect environment, it seems, for me. I didn't really know what to expect when I moved here because I have never lived in a small village before, but I did come in with a lot of enthusiasm.
But this close-knit community is not immediately trusting of outsiders.
You've got to be very careful what you say in a small place like this because you upset too many people.
As soon as she moved in, Meg, a dedicated animal lover, was in seventh heaven.
And this is my fruit cage, which has all been shared by ducks, and the ducks have been very safe from foxes here. I do feel that animals need a spokesperson. They don't have rights. This area I feed the pheasants because I try to keep them off the hill where they're shot.
Meg seemed oblivious that farming communities have a very different attitude to animals.
I've been described as a warrior for animals, and I'm proud of that, you know.
Once she'd settled in, Meg decided she needed a way of introducing herself to the locals.
I organised an event sort of fairly soon after we moved in, which wasn't incredibly well attended by the villagers, but I didn't take that personally. My dog show that I organised, this was advertising the open night in the RSPCA shop.
She always had signs on her gate posts of there was always something going on.
The villagers were beginning to get wind of Meg's obsession for protecting all creatures great and small, and she certainly made an impression.
When I met Meg for the first time, I thought she was very interfering old lady.
I was standing by my house and there was a gentleman from up the road who was walking his dogs in the field. It was pheasant breeding time and there were youngsters running around, and when I saw him doing it I thought, no, he can't let his dog do that. A person walking around is bad enough, but a dog running around, ground nesting birds and chicks around. He was chasing the pheasants were flying up. So I couldn't help myself. I didn't think, I just shouted. He's held that pretty well against me ever since.
You must not do this, you must do this. Look after animals. Gave you earache all the time.
She was regarded, rightly or wrongly, as a bit of a nutter with regards to her animal sort of welfare thing, but I think she did used to take it to extremes. To come and live in a rural, small farming village and then expect people to not do things in the country that they do, why would you want to go and live in the middle of it?
Although Meg hadn't become close to her neighbours, she did make some new friends.
In my life, I hadn't seen a badger, but I had badgers on my doorstep. I felt so privileged because not many people in this country ever see a live badger.
The villagers didn't want to encourage badgers, some believing they could spread tuberculosis in cattle, but Meg ignored them, determined to feed her badgers.
Sandwiches, peanuts, dried fruit.
Her decision didn't go down well with the locals.
I was told by one of my neighbours that she had to put a fence up because the badgers were spoiling her garden, and she said it very accusingly.
But Meg didn't stop there. Her next move would create an uproar that would divide the village.
I don't believe she realised really what the repercussions could be.
In northeast London, Love Thy Neighbour had turned to hate when one man's desire to create a 5-bedroom palace brought noise, destruction and darkness.
It got to the stage that I was frightened to even come out into the garden because there was just builders everywhere.
But for Helen Corlin, living next door to nightmare neighbour Mr. Ahmed was about to get a whole lot worse.
It was early spring. They took out the back supporting wall. They left the upstairs walls and they took out the back of the ground floor, the back wall and the side wall.
Helen feared the house next door was unstable and could fall down.
We could have lost our house and we could have lost our lives because our windows are on that side of the house.
At the front of the house, things weren't much better either, as Tony, Mr. Ahmed's other neighbour, found out.
As you can see, this is another piece of Mr. Ahmed's empire. The porch, which was perfectly okay before, was just knocked down. No prior warning, no consideration to us. When they knocked it down, all the rubble and the dirt and everything come onto our land. They didn't do anything to protect our wall, so it got soaked. The other one used to come to here, and it was a perfectly good porch. Again, it's back to that no consideration for us, no consideration for our property at all.
As the building work next door progressed, Tony began to notice worrying damage to his house.
And the first thing I immediately saw was a huge crack, which literally went right across the whole hall. It just looked like it went on forever. So I come into my daughter's room and the crack went right along the top and all the way down the window. I was absolutely furious. I went running down the stairs to Mr. Ahmed and his builders who were outside talking to my wife and called them all in. And I called them in here and literally, as soon as Veronica saw this, she screamed because she thought the whole house was going to fall down. They just went, oh. And I said, well, you've got to be, what have you done? Just said, well, we'll fix it. But he just couldn't get the magnitude of the whole thing. And it was just no remorse. It was like, oh, you know, so what?
And it seemed Mr. Ahmed also had some help with building techniques from an unusual source.
The work was being carried out by Mr. Ahmed and his mates using self-help YouTube videos.
Well, that's pathetic. It's as simple as that. That's the first I've heard that he used self-help videos to build a house.
No, I knew he went onto the internet. He told me he'd searched on the internet.
I find it absolutely astonishing that well, I'm gobsmacked with that.
Both sets of neighbours were convinced the building work was unsatisfactory and risked their own safety.
They got a representative down who then saw that the site was unsafe, and they called in the health and safety executive, who then come and shut the site.
Still to come, Mr. Ahmed sees red over his neighbours' complaints.
He's threatened to blow our house up. He's threatened to put bricks through our window.
And in Bournemouth, Deborah Freestone is fighting back.
Police said if I continued behaving in this way, I would be arrested.
In Somerset, new arrival Meg Sunningdale's love of animals was beginning to alienate her from the neighbours.
She was regarded, rightly or wrongly, as a bit of a nutter.
She had begun feeding badgers in her garden, and this obsession with wildlife was dividing opinion in the village.
I think badgers were a greater priority to me than being part of the community.
But government policy was that drastic action needed to be taken to lower the size of the badger population in the UK. It was believed they were helping to spread tuberculosis in cattle. And despite fierce debate on the subject, in 2012 farmers in the Somerset area became part of a pilot scheme and were issued with licences to carry out a badger cull within a mile of Meg's back door.
When we heard that there was going to be a badger cull, we just didn't believe it. We couldn't believe that human beings would be prepared to do that.
I appreciate that there is a problem with badgers. I don't necessarily agree that, I say, killing a load of them is going to make a difference to their problem. But that's what they powers to be decided. And Meg wanted to make an issue about it, which she definitely made an issue.
By now, Meg was a woman on a mission, with all thoughts of neighbourly relations out the window. She communicated with badger protection groups and was shocked to discover that one of her neighbours was allegedly taking part in the badger cull.
I just couldn't believe that he would be part of a badger cull. And my natural instinct was to name and shame this person.
With that information, Meg's next act would have serious consequences.
People who are shooting badgers didn't want anybody to know, obviously, and I don't think that's right. I think they should be prepared to tell people.
She went ahead and wrote the name of the alleged shooter on her poster and stuck it on her gate for all the locals to see. Meg's outed neighbour, who can't be named, declined to tell his side of the story.
I don't know what I was thinking at the time. I just did it.
Militant Meg was unstoppable. She decided to put up more posters revealing the local man's identity in the centre of the village, creating a huge rift with the majority of neighbours.
Couldn't believe that someone would be that, I don't know, stupid to actually do that. It was unbelievable.
Meg's crusade had caught the attention of the press. A national newspaper sent a photographer to the village to snap Meg holding the poster. The image sparked fury against her neighbour, whose personal details were now exposed.
I know that he was getting abusive phone calls, emails. They had all his contact details. It was like non-stop. He was frightened for his family, all because Meg had put posters up.
I didn't feel bad about the phone calls they were receiving. I thought, well, that's a bit more ammunition. I can't remember being remorseful.
The abusive phone calls from protesters continued to flood into the alleged shooter, and soon it became too much.
I mean, he was that frightened for his family, his wife and children, that he moved them out of the village.
Tensions were now increasing in the village, and neighbours made their feelings towards Meg clear. She was now ostracised from the community.
People would drive along here mouthing evil bitch.
Under siege. Back in London, the dispute over Mr. Ahmed's extension had eased, as the site shut down for safety reasons.
We could have lost our house and we could have lost our lives because our windows are on that side of the house.
Peace returned to the street for the next 3 months. Mr. Ahmed was instructed that if he wanted to finish off his extension, he would need a structural engineer. His neighbours were still living next to the Nightmare, but at least they could take comfort a professional was now in charge. But more trouble soon came knocking at their door.
I was not given any promises that we will look after your property or we will put protection up. There wasn't anything. And I was told not to let him put scaffolding up on my property.
When Helen refused, relations with Mr. Ahmed hit a new low.
Mr. Ahmed has threatened me to a degree that he has told me I should watch my back.
And it wasn't aimed just at Helen.
He's threatened to blow our house up. He's threatened to put bricks through our window.
However, Mr. Ahmed claims they were nothing more than empty threats.
I've been very ill this year and I've literally had to pull myself up and start fighting again.
Despite his intimidation, Helen refused to give up.
We did a right to light survey, which was paid for by my insurance company and their legal team. And we took it to the court, and from our local court, it was sent straight up to the High Court.
After 2.5 years of misery, she finally had some resolution.
And he gave me an out-of-court settlement of £30,000 in damages and £7,500 in legal costs.
Tony and Veronica, though, have received no compensation. Mr. Ahmed has promised he will repair their party wall, but the Martins continue to despair at unfinished building work next door.
3 years on, we're still living through it all the time, and we don't really know if there's going to be more damage to our house in future years.
There is no completion date for now.
It's like your worst nightmare, but the only good thing about a nightmare is you're going to wake up sometime. We wake up and it's still there.
But it appears the cracks in these neighbourly relations may never be mended.
I'd like to be on speaking terms with them, but you can't.
My relationship with Mr. Ahmed is non-existent. I do not even acknowledge his existence. He's ruined everything we've ever worked for.
In Bournemouth, Deborah Freestone had built a new driveway on an unregistered 20-foot patch of land.
It's a strip of land that goes nowhere, only into my garden, and no use to anyone at all.
But her neighbours, including Mr. Garignani, objected.
I threw it at Mr. Garignani and told them both to get off my property and stay off my property.
By now, Mr. Garignani had indicated that he wanted to put in a claim for the land. Months passed without incident, and the land remained unregistered. But the peace was about to be shattered.
I just finished work and I drove home. As I approached the drive, I realised my lovely gates had gone. And I inspected the post and it had actually been sawn off. And my gates were delivered back to me inside my garden and all piled up, resting up against my fence.
Mr. Garignani had removed Deborah's new gates.
Just then, I looked down the road and Zach was coming down. You couldn't believe it, could you, Zach?
No.
He'd done it.
The emotions were just like, it was anger, then frustration, then upset.
I phoned up the police and I said, in a mood, I feel like throwing a brick through his... Said he was a Polish git, because I thought he was Polish around all that time. And apparently it was discrimination, racist. They said that my phone call was very aggressive. I said I was annoyed, but no, I'm not an aggressive person. They had that on record, and they kept that.
No, I went to his window and went, Charles, can you come out? I want to talk to you, I don't know what's going on. 2 squad cars ran from there to there and went up to me and went, can you please move?
So he was too scared, a coward, to confront us and told the police that he was being intimidated by a 15-year-old and he was acting in an aggressive manner. And we thought, no, we're going to put them back up for our privacy.
Deborah and Zach put the gate back up, this time on their own boundary. A turf war was now declared between the once friendly neighbours. 3 months later, Deborah's friend and neighbour, Pamela LeBlonde, was to become witness to another event.
I was sitting in the chair and I heard shoveling going on, which seemed unusual, and I had a look out of the window. There seemed to be 2 men digging up the driveway. One of them turned and I realised it was Mr. Garignani. And then I thought, get evidence. So I ran and asked one of my lodgers if I could borrow his camera. Managed to get the camera into the little gap by lifting this without being seen, and took footage of the whole thing.
Mr. Garignani and another man were digging up the driveway Deborah had built on the land.
I arrived later on and I just came around the corner and I just wow, I saw all the rubble and all the mess and I was just heartbroken. The paving slabs had been dug up and stacked like playing cards up against the gates. It's all been dug up and ruined, and so the money and my mum's memory has been destroyed for me.
Mr. Garignani was sending a clear message to his neighbour.
Mr. Garignani parked his BMW on the driveway. He didn't need to do that because he had a forecourt and he had his own garage. He just did it to annoy me.
But in return, Deborah took the law into her own hands, a move which was to have serious repercussions, making her look like the nightmare neighbour.
One day I put a big notice up in my car with a big arrow pointing to his house, saying, look what Mr. Garignani has done. I reversed my car so everyone could see. I got in big trouble for that, and the police came round and said that if I didn't remove it and if I continued behaving in this way, I would be arrested.
She did over-exaggerate and get angry. It's in her to try and make sure no one can push her around and push her into a corner.
Mr. Garignani alleged that Deborah was continually harassing him, but she felt she was the victim.
I was in contact with Mr. Garignani as he sent me letters on a regular basis and often containing threats of removing my car, building walls to block my garden, also saying that I was harassing him and his family and causing them a great deal of upset. As the time went on, Mr. Garignani called the police on me and my son for bizarre things, such as looking in his window. barking at his wife.
Neighbourly relations were now in pieces. Coming up, things for Deborah take a very serious turn.
To enter a courtroom with a judge just terrified me.
While in Somerset, Meg gets a very clear message from her neighbours.
And he stopped, reversed, and shone a huge bright light onto us. And I said to him, "You're an absolute scumbag."
Back in Bournemouth, Deborah Freestone was in battle with her neighbour over a patch of land.
Mr. Garriganani called the police on me and my son for bizarre things, such as looking in his window, barking at his wife.
After a year of relentless dispute, one day the situation came to a head.
I received a court summons for harassment through all of Mr. Garriganani's complaints against me. It was the police actually that brought a case of harassment out on me, and I had to go to court. I was absolutely gutted. The day I went to court was very nerve-wracking. To enter a courtroom with a judge just terrified me. There was no evidence brought from the police or Mr. Garriganani, and the case was dropped.
Deborah was free to go, but that wasn't the end of it.
The judge gave me a restraining order for a year not to contact Mr. Garriganani in any way. It says not to enter his property, not to look into his window whilst walking past his property, contacting him directly or via a friend, only through solicitors. Basically not to talk to him.
Although she felt she'd done nothing wrong, Deborah accepted the court order.
By accepting the restraining order, I felt like I was saying that I was guilty of doing things. It just felt wrong really that I was doing it, but it did clear the case and wipe the slate clean, as it were.
When asked, Mr. Garriganani declined to comment on the events that led to the restraining order. Deborah may have accepted the court's decision, but she isn't giving up her fight to claim the land.
The events over the past 2 years have been unnecessary. Hopefully in the future the drive can be reconstructed and I can eventually claim the land and add it to my deeds.
This could be one turf war that's not laid to rest just yet. In a quiet corner of Somerset, Meg Sunningdale had created a huge rift with her neighbours over a badger cull.
I gradually noticed that people weren't speaking to me.
I don't think this is about the animals, this is about the nonsense that came in behind it.
Media reports on Meg's opposition to the cull drew animal rights protesters to camp out close to the village. They gathered in the local woods at night.
This is the gate that a lot of protesters would have had to open and walk through to this Withycombe Wood. On several occasions there was shooting beside me and I had to use these to make my presence known because I was really fearful.
Thanks to Meg's extreme actions, the village was now under siege.
Right, this is where I live. This is my place. That is the cover where all the protesters were kicking off. Then they used to congregate under that big oak tree. That's where they used to have a little bit of a shindig. They had no worry about shining spotlights. That's what they were, spotlights in all of these windows along here. Everybody knew about it. They didn't normally start until probably 2:30 in the morning. Just give you time to get asleep. Started off with the lights, whistle, air horns. I don't need them out there keeping me. But what they did achieve was to certainly piss us off along here.
Quite loud. Yeah, it needs to be. My response to people who are complaining or have complained about noise in their village, my response to that would be, what about the noise the shooters have been making?
Locals were unimpressed by the protesters' tactics, which were fully supported by Meg, whose loyalties to her neighbours were by now long forgotten.
I think badgers were a greater priority to me than being part of the community.
At odds with the rest of the locals, Meg's naming and shaming tactics ended up with the police being called.
Fine, yes, come along to the police station. What an experience.
Meg was cautioned for exposing the personal details of the shooter.
I'm quite proud to have a caution for badgers, not a problem.
With the village now overrun with protesters, Withycombe was more like a war zone, with unrepentant Meg right in the thick of things.
We were spotted by a shooter returning home, and he stopped, reversed, and shone a huge bright light onto us, really dazzling, like a floodlight. And I said to him, "You're an absolute scumbag." But he sort of didn't say a word, and he drove on. The next day, I had 3 bags of dog excrement in my garden. I thought, what can I do with this?
What Meg did do was return it to one of the neighbours who she believed may have been involved, and she left a very clear note.
The note said, if you feel the need to shoot living targets, maybe you ought to join the army, and oh no, probably you would be too cowardly to be on the other end of a gun.
Quite inflammatory.
Yes. Nasty.
The neighbours' response was to call the police.
They said, you had better not do it again. I promised not to do it again, and signed a little thing, and that was that.
After 6 weeks, the cult ended, having failed to reach its target. The protesters finally left Withycombe. But the ill feeling between neighbours and a now isolated Meg festered.
I don't know what reputation I had to start with, so I don't know about ruin, but I certainly have a very bad reputation now.
Do I feel any sympathy for her? No, I don't. I believe she's brought everything on herself.
For now, Britain's badgers can breathe safely. But there is one casualty in all this.
I think maybe a small village isn't the place for me.
With Meg selling up and moving on, it seems she won't be missed in the village of Withycombe.
I don't think it'll make any difference whatsoever. Except I won't be able to say we've got a nutter living in the village anymore.
Next time, blood is spilt in Barnsley.
He was coming up the drive here with blood all over his arm.
A neighbourly dispute in Scotland tears a family apart.
It became too much for the marriage in the end. I think this would have broken any family.
And house prices tumble when squatters move in next door.
The estate agent, he said between 25 and 35% has come off the value of my property.
It Takes a Thief to Catch a Thief continues its new series this Thursday on Channel 5 at 8 o'clock. But the law and disorder doesn't end there. Next tonight, it's Can't Pay, Will Take It Away, new with the final demand.